Gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight, we sail to ancient Egypt. Feel warm sand shifting beneath your bare feet. Breathe in the sweet, heady perfume of lotus blossoms carried on the evening breeze. And let history rock you to sleep. The Nile whispers secrets against its banks as you approach the temple complex, bathed in the fading ochre light. Inside the dim, columned hall, illuminated by flickering oil lamps, sits Hori, the temple scribe. His reed pen Qualam whispers across a sheet of papyrus stretched taut upon his writing board. The surface feels surprisingly cool and smooth beneath his practiced fingers, yet possesses a subtle, pleasing texture, like woven cloth. This remarkable material, the very foundation of Egyptian record-keeping, was painstakingly crafted from the pith of Nile reeds, sliced, layered, pressed, and polished. Hori dips his pen into a cake of dense, black ink made from soot and gum. He carefully forms hieroglyphs in precise vertical columns, a sacred task capturing offerings received for the god Amun. The scent of the ink, earthy and sharp, mingles with the lingering sweetness of lotuses placed before a nearby statue. Sand, fine as dust, drifts almost imperceptibly across the floor, a constant golden companion in this land born of the river. The rhythmic scratch of Hori's pen lulls you deeper. He pauses, blowing gently upon a freshly inked cartouche naming the pharaoh, ensuring the precious words won't smudge. Beyond his quiet corner, the distant chant of priests rises and falls like the river's own breath, a low drone harmonizing with the chirping of crickets venturing into the cooling night. Shadows cast by the great pillars stretch and merge, transforming the hall into a landscape of slumbering giants. Hori carefully rolls the completed section of the scroll, his fingers tracing the slightly rough edge where the papyrus sheet joins the next. He reaches for a fresh sheet, its pale surface pristine, ready to absorb the stories of grain stores and divine favor. His work demanded immense skill. Scribes were highly respected, often coming from privileged families, their literacy a rare and vital key to administration and the divine word. The flickering lamplight catches the faint, natural grid lines formed by the layered papyrus strips, a subtle guide for his steady hand. A gecko scuttles silently across the wall, chasing a moth drawn to the flame. Fatigue begins to soften Hori's focus. The hieroglyphs seem to swim slightly before his eyes: the ibis, the owl, the ankh, their familiar shapes blurring at the edges. The scent of the ink feels heavier now, more insistent, blending with the dry, ancient smell of stone and the faint, metallic tang carried on the night air from the distant desert. His shoulders ache from hours of stillness. He carefully sets down his pen beside the worn palette, its hollows holding cakes of red and black ochre. The silence in this part of the vast temple deepens, absorbing the distant chants until they become a mere vibration, felt through the cool stone floor rather than a sound heard. He rests his hand upon the partially rolled scroll, feeling the slight springiness of the papyrus core beneath its smoothed surface. This scroll, like countless others stored in temple archives and tombs, held knowledge meant to endure, written on a material prized for its relative durability in Egypt's dry climate. He gazes at the columns of text, a testament to order amidst the whispering sands, a fragile barrier against the forgetting of days. A cool draft sighs through the hall, making the lamp flames dip and sway, casting long, dancing shadows that momentarily bring the carved gods to life upon the walls before settling once more into stillness. The stillness deepens around Hori, thick as the temple incense that clings to the stone. His eyelids, heavy as sun-warmed clay, flutter closed for a heartbeat too long. The rhythmic scratch scratch of his pen has ceased, replaced by the soft, almost imperceptible sigh escaping his lips. The dancing shadows thrown by the guttering lamp upon the wall seem to slow, stretching into long, languid shapes that merge with the carved figures of Osiris and Isis. The scent of lotus, once vibrant, now mingles seamlessly with the dry parchment aroma of the scroll beneath his resting hand and the ancient, sun-baked scent of the sandstone pillars. The cool night air drifts across his skin, a gentle counterpoint to the lingering warmth of the day held within the stones. In this liminal space between wakefulness and dreaming, the meticulously recorded columns of grain and linen offerings on the papyrus seem to shimmer, the hieroglyphs softening at their edges like ink dropped into water. He feels the slight, fibrous roughness of the papyrus edge against his cheek where his head has tilted forward, a texture both familiar and strangely distant. Papyrus, the prized writing surface traded across the ancient Mediterranean, was so valuable that old scrolls were sometimes scraped clean and reused, a practice known as a palimpsest, though temple records like these were often meticulously preserved, seared, in sealed jars within the archive. The knowledge held on these fragile sheets, made from the river's own reeds, was the lifeblood of the kingdom, detailing everything from tax yields to sacred rituals. Hori's breath evens out, becoming a slow, deep rhythm that matches the distant, almost vanished hum of the river Nile itself, a sound felt more in the bones than heard by the ears. The faint grid, lines of the papyrus, visible even in the low light, seemed to guide his drifting thoughts downwards into the quiet dark. The oil in the small lamp dips critically low, the flame shrinking to a fragile, blue, tinged bead that casts only the faintest halo of light immediately around it. The vast hall surrenders further to shadow, the great pillars dissolving into looming forms. The scent of the burning wick grows sharper, tinged with the acrid note of the final dregs of castor oil. Hori doesn't stir. His consciousness has slipped anchor, carried away on the slow, dark current of the night. The reed pen lies abandoned near his still fingers, a tiny drop of ink gleaming like a dark jewel on the palette's edge. The papyrus scroll, partially rolled, rests secure under his slack palm, its surface cool. In his dreaming mind, the neatly recorded hieratic script might transform into reeds swaying on the riverbank, or perhaps the winding path of the Nile itself flowing across the smoothed surface. The immense labor behind each scroll, harvesting the reeds, slicing the pith, meticulously layering and pressing the strips, polishing the sheet with a smooth stone, is momentarily forgotten in the simplicity of sleep. Scribes like Hori, guardians of this sacred craft, were trained rigorously in special schools attached to temples or palaces, their hands disciplined to form thousands of precise characters. The silence is absolute now, profound and embracing, broken only by the soft, intermittent chirp of a cricket hidden somewhere in the cool recesses near the floor. Even the desert wind outside seems to hold its breath. The last flicker of the lamp flame trembles, stretching upwards in one final, slender thread of light before vanishing completely, surrendering the scribe and his precious scroll to the gentle, all-encompassing embrace of the Egyptian night. The darkness feels soft, a velvet curtain drawn over the bustling world of the day, leaving only the deep, steady rhythm of peaceful slumber. The profound dark isn't empty. It pulses with the deep, slow rhythm of Hori's slumber, a quiet counterpoint to the imagined lap of Nile water against papyrus reeds that now fills his dreaming mind. Gone is the cool stone floor, replaced by a sensation of drifting, not on water, but within it, buoyant and weightless. The scent shifts to the fading ink, and dry papyrus dissolve into the rich, wet earth smell of the riverbank at dawn, mingled with the faint, green tang of freshly cut reeds. He feels the imagined fibers, thick and damp, brush against his skin as he floats. In his dream, the scroll itself unfurls, vast as the night sky, its surface no longer inscribed with mundane tallies, but shimmering with constellations formed from hieratic script, ducks becoming stars, grain stalks tracing the Milky Way. He hears, not the scratch of his pen, but the soft shush of a felucca's sail catching the breeze, a sound woven into the very fabric of river life. This dream papyrus feels different under his dream, hand cooler, more yielding, alive with the memory of the marsh. He knows, even asleep, the immense value of the knowledge such scrolls held. Temple archives meticulously stored them in sealed pottery jars within labyrinthine storehouses, their clay stoppers often marked with a brief docket describing the contents. The reed pen in his dream isn't a tool, but a living stalk, dripping not ink, but clear, cool Nile water that forms fleeting hieroglyphs on the flowing surface below. The meticulous vertical columns he painstakingly wrote by lamplight now seem to dance horizontally across the shimmering dream. River, reflecting the star map above, he drifts past towering dream, lotus blossoms, their scent intensified, almost narcotic, their petals glowing with a soft, internal light like captured moonlight. The dream deepens, pulling him gently downstream. The rhythmic shush of the sail blends seamlessly with his own breathing, a lullaby sung by the river itself. The coolness of the water permeates his being, washing away the last residue of the scribe's fatigue, leaving only profound tranquility. The constellations of script above begin to dim, one by one, like lamps being extinguished across a vast, sleeping city. The sound of the river softens, becoming a whisper, then a sigh. The sigh of the river dissolves into utter stillness. Hori's dream, self no longer floats on the water, but rests within the deep, cool silt of the riverbed itself, cradled by the ancient earth. The vibrant constellations of script have faded entirely, leaving only a profound, velvety blackness that feels less like absence and more like a gentle embrace. The scent of wet earth and green reeds softens, merging with the cool, mineral tang of the deep mud, the very source of the fertile black soil Kemet, the black land that gave Egypt life. There's no sound, not even the imagined lap of water, only the immense, silent pulse of the sleeping land. His body feels weightless, anchored yet free, like a water-logged reed settling peacefully onto the bottom. The frantic energy of the scribe's day, the calculations, the precision, the sacred responsibility of recording offerings for Amun is a distant memory, washed away by the river of sleep. He becomes aware, distantly, of the faint, rhythmic pressure of his own heartbeat, a slow drum echoing the pulse of the Niles. Hidden currents far above. It's the only movement in this perfect stillness. The boundaries between himself, the dreaming scribe, and the cool, nurturing silt begin to dissolve. He is the resting reed. He is the fertile darkness. The immense, silent archives of the temple, rows upon rows of scrolls stored in tall, labeled pottery jars within cool, dark chambers, feel mirrored here in the deep earth, a repository of ancient calm. Even the precious rush pens, carefully stored upright in clay pots filled with water to keep their nibs supple, are forgotten tools in this realm of pure being. The faintest sensation, like the brush of a fish's fin or the ghostly drift of submerged papyrus fiber, passes through his consciousness, not startling, but simply part of the tranquil, liquid dark. The coolness permeates every particle, a balm after the day's warmth held in the stones. It seeps into bone, into thought, dissolving the last vestiges of wakefulness. The pressure of the silt is comforting, a gentle, encompassing weight promising profound rest. The distant, rhythmic thrum of his heart slows further, sensing with the timeless rhythm of the land itself, a deep, resonant silence that isn't empty, but full of potential, like a seed waiting in the dark earth for the return of the sun. The silence holds deep and complete, like the stillness within a sealed tomb. Yet a subtle shift begins. Not a sound, but a sense the faintest, most imperceptible lessening of the profound dark. It's the distant memory of light, a pressure behind closed eyelids that isn't yet dawn. But its promise, the cool, mineral embrace of the silt remains, but now carries a whisper of warmth, like the first touch of Ra's distant chariot warming the earth's surface leagues above. The scent of deep mud softens, overlaid by the ghost of baking bread carried on a breeze from the waking village beyond the temple walls, mingling strangely with the lingering coolness. Hori's consciousness, adrift in the fertile blackness, begins a slow, inevitable ascent, the rhythmic pulse. That was his heartbeat merges with another sound. Faint at first, then clearer the rhythmic crunch, crunch of a mortar and pestle grinding pigments in a courtyard nearby. Dawn approaches. Scribes didn't just write. They prepared their own inks and pigments daily, grinding minerals like malachite for green or ochre for red with gum and water into cakes. The sound is steady, purposeful, a call back to duty. He feels the weight of his own limbs returning, no longer dissolved into the silt, but resting heavily upon the cool stone floor where he truly sleeps. The rough texture of the papyrus edge is distinct once more against his cheek. The deep, velvety black behind his eyelids lightens to a deep indigo, then a bruised purple. The imagined scent of lotus blossoms pushes through the memory of earth, sweeter and sharper now, carried on a cooler draft sighing through the columned hall, the night's final breath. He feels a stiffness in his neck, the pleasant ache of muscles used in long concentration the day before. The immense silence of the sleeping temple is fraying at the edges. Beyond the grinding pestle, a single, tentative bird call pierces the air, answered by another from the direction of the sacred lake. The distant Nile's murmur, absent in the depths of his dream, silt, becomes a soft, constant whisper once more, the lifeblood of the waking land. His fingers, resting on the scroll, twitch minutely. The papyrus feels less like a dream, river now, more like itself, slightly fibrous, cool, holding the potential of the day's records. Temple scribes, like Hori, often worked within complex administrative hierarchies, their meticulous records enabling the redistribution of grain, linen, and labor that sustained Pharaoh's kingdom. The air itself feels lighter, charged with the anticipation of the coming day, yet still draped in the soft, clinging veil of night's peace. His breathing deepens. Not the slow tide of sleep, but the conscious intake of air before awakening. The cool stone beneath him, the faint scent of ink and dust. The distant sounds of the stirring temple complex, they anchor him gently back to his body, back to the dim hall where the oil lamps will soon be rekindled. He draws a long, slow breath, feeling the night's deep restoration settle in his bones, the scroll a familiar weight beneath his hand. Ready. The cool stone beneath Hori's cheek holds a memory of the deep river silt, a lingering coolness against the subtle warmth now stealing into the hall. Dawn isn't a sudden arrival, but a slow seeping of pale, pearlescent light through the high clerestory windows. It catches the motes of dust drifting lazily in the still air, turning them into tiny, swirling constellations, faint echoes of his dream sky. The rhythmic crunch of the pestle-grinding pigments outside becomes more distinct, a grounding counterpoint to the fading whispers of his dream. He feels the familiar stiffness in his shoulders, the pleasant ache in the fingers still curled loosely around the papyrus scroll. The scent of lotus is clearer now, fresher, perhaps brought in by the morning breeze that also carries the faint, damp, earth smell of the temple gardens being watered. The heavier scent of ink and aged papyrus reasserts itself, mingling with the new day. A low murmur of voices begins to filter through the great hall, the soft greetings of early, arriving priests, the shuffle of sandaled feet on sandy stone. The vast space, so profoundly silent hours before, starts to breathe again. Hori draws a deeper breath, feeling the night's deep peace settle within him like sediment, rich and nourishing. His fingers twitch again, this time with a faint, instinctive movement towards his reed pen. The papyrus beneath his hand feels different in this nascent light, no longer a vessel for dreams, but ready once more for the precise dance of hieratic script. He remembers the weight of the task, recording yesterday's offerings of grain, measured meticulously in hecat units, and fine linen, its quality graded by temple weavers. Scribes like Hori often served as witnesses to important transactions, their records carrying legal weight, meticulously dated by the regnal year of the pharaoh. The cool air brushes his skin, carrying the faint tang of baking bread more strongly now, a promise of the simple morning meal to come. The immense pillars, gray in the half-light, begin to regain their defined edges, the carved gods emerging from the shadows, their inlaid eyes still holding the night's mystery. His eyelids feel heavy, but the pull of sleep is loosening its grip, replaced by the gentle, insistent tug of duty. The dream river recedes, leaving behind a profound calm, a sense of being anchored not in silt, but in the quiet rhythm of the temple's awakening life. The scroll, half unrolled, waits. The reed pen lies ready. The world is softly returning, color seeping back into the edges of his consciousness like ink spreading on fresh papyrus. A single, clear bird call rings out from the garden, sharp and bright, a final punctuation to the night's silent story. The sharp bird call lingers, a silver thread woven into the softening gloom. Hori's eyelids, crusted faintly with sleep, sand, flutter open. For a heartbeat, the dream's cool silt clings, merging with the reality of the cool stone floor beneath his cheek and the smooth, slightly rough edge of the papyrus pressed against his skin. The pearlescent dawn light, strengthening now, paints the towering pillars in stripes of pale gold and lingering indigo. It falls directly upon the open section of the scroll before him, illuminating the dense columns of hieratic script he inscribed hours ago. The black ink, meticulously applied, seems to drink the new light, becoming deeper, richer. The scent of night lotus, deep earth, extinguished lamp oil is being gently overwhelmed. The tang of baking bread grows bolder, mingling with the dry, papery aroma of the scroll itself and a fresh, green note of damp herbs being swept from the courtyard flags outside. The murmur of priests is closer now, a low, resonant chanting beginning near the inner sanctuary, accompanied by the rhythmic shake of a sistrum. Its sound like dried reeds whispering secrets. It's the sound of Ma'at, cosmic order, being reaffirmed at dawn. Hori shifts, feeling the stiffness in his muscles protest, a familiar ache earned by long hours hunched over his sacred task. He carefully lifts his head from the scroll, the imprint of its edge faintly visible on his cheek. His gaze travels over yesterday's work, the precise counts of barley and haycat, the grades of linen, scanty cloth noted for its fineness, the jars of honey measured by volume. This record wasn't merely administrative. It was a divine accounting, proof of the temple's wealth and the people's piety, ensuring the gods' continued favor and the pharaoh's strength. He sees a tiny smudge near a numeral, a flaw noticed only in this revealing light. A sigh escapes him, almost lost in the rising chant. Imperfections couldn't stand. The record must be pristine. Later, he would carefully scrape the surface with a pumice stone, erasing the error papyrus. Though durable, allowed for such corrections, its layered structure forgiving minor amendments when handled with skill. The reed pen, lying dormant beside the palette, feels cool and smooth as he picks it up, testing its familiar weight. The red ochre cake glows softly in the dawn light. He would need it soon for headings, for the pharaoh's name. The rhythm of the chant and the sistrum seeps into his bones, steadying him, replacing the river's dream, lullaby with the pulse of the waking temple. He rolls his shoulders, feeling the night's deep peace settle like fertile Nile mud within him, a reservoir of calm for the day's meticulous demands. The cool air carries the scent of water now, freshly drawn, perhaps for the morning ablutions. The scroll waits, patient as the Sphinx, ready for the day's new stories to be etched onto its pale, fibrous skin. The dream's weightlessness is gone, replaced by the grounded certainty of purpose. The comforting weight of the reed in his hand, and the soft, insistent call of duty carried on the golden light of Ra's returning chariot. The reed pen rests cool and solid in Hori's grasp, a familiar anchor returning him fully to the waking world. The pearly dawn light has strengthened, gilding the tops of the towering pillars and setting motes of dust, dancing like golden flecks in the still air. The rhythmic chant of the priests and the soft shake of the sistrum resonate through the stone, a sacred pulse driving away the last clinging tendrils of the dream, river's silence. The scent of baking bread is rich and insistent now, mingling with the dry parchment smell of the scroll and the faint, clean aroma of water sprinkled on the swept courtyard stones outside. His shoulders still hold the echo of stiffness, but it's a grounding sensation, a reminder of purpose. He looks down at the scroll, illuminated by Ra's growing light. The tiny smudge near the numeral seems insignificant now, a mere whisper of imperfection, soon to be corrected with a careful scrape of pumice stone, a testament to the papyrus's forgiving nature, its layered strips allowing minor erasures for the sake of flawless sacred accounting. This record, detailing offerings measured in precise haycat and graded linen, was more than numbers. It was the tangible pulse of Ma'at, the divine order flowing through temple, pharaoh, and fertile black land. The reed pen in his hand, its nib kept sharp and supple by soaking in water overnight, felt like an extension of his will, ready to resume its vital dance. Scribes like Hori, trained rigorously within temple schools, were the unseen weavers of this order, their precise hieratic script binding the earthly to the divine. The cool morning air, carrying the green scent of watered herbs, brushes his cheek. He takes a slow, deep breath, drawing in the peace of the deep night's rest that still lingers within his bones, a reservoir of calm. The murmur of the awakening temple, the distant call of a water-bearer, the solid weight of the scroll beneath his hand, these are the textures of his anchored world. The dream's vast. Liquid dark has receded, leaving behind the quiet certainty of the scribe's stool, the smooth writing board, and the pale expanse of papyrus waiting for the day's sacred stories. ready to be inscribed under the watchful eyes of the carved gods emerging fully from the shadows. The rhythmic chant rises, steady and eternal. The papyrus scroll grows heavy. Hori's world fades. Carry this peace. Sleep well, time, weaver. Gather your dreams, weary traveler. Tonight, we sail to Mesopotamia. Feel wet clay yielding beneath your fingers. Breathe in the dusty sweetness of date palms, carried on the warm evening breeze. And let history rock you to sleep. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of kneading ceased as Nebuchadnezzar finally felt the consistency was perfect, cool, dense, and utterly malleable. He scooped a generous lump onto his worn wooden workbench, the surface smoothed by generations of potters before him. With strong, practiced hands, he began pressing and patting, coaxing the clay into a thick, slightly oblong slab. It felt alive under his palms, cool and yielding, yet holding the promise of permanence. He smoothed the surface with a damp, flat stone, leaving it flawless and ready to receive its story. Outside his workshop's open doorway, the setting sun painted the mud, brick houses of Babylon in hues of ochre and gold, while the scent of baking bread mingled with the ever-present fragrance of the palm groves lining the nearby canal. Reaching for his kalmu, a sharpened reed stylus, Nebuchadnezzar paused, feeling the familiar weight and balance. This tablet wasn't destined to be a humble cooking pot or storage jar. This was destined for the temple scribe. He took a slow breath, inhaling the complex perfume of the city, wet earth, wood smoke, spices from the distant market, and the deep, sweet resinous scent of the date palms rustling softly. His mind cleared. He pressed the stylus into the clay's yielding surface, angling it precisely, then lifting to leave behind the first wedge-shaped impression. Press, lift, press, lift. Each deliberate motion created the distinctive cuneiform script, its name derived from the Latin for wedge, shaped, a testament to the reed tool's unique mark. This was the writing system that recorded laws, hymns, and the very grain that sustained the city. He worked steadily, his fingers tracing the intricate dance learned from his own father, forming symbols representing barley, measures, and the name of the temple administrator. The characters emerged row by neat row, a record of the season's grain yield from the temple fields near the Ishtar Gate. Nebuchadnezzar's brow furrowed slightly in concentration, his calloused thumb gently wiping away a stray fleck of clay. He thought of the vast storerooms beneath the ziggurat, Itamananki, where this humble tablet would eventually reside, nestled amongst thousands of others. These sun-dried or kiln-fired tablets became surprisingly durable records, surviving millennia buried beneath the sands. The rhythmic scratching of the reed was the only sound in his small workshop, now a soft counterpoint to the distant bleating of sheep and the murmur of the Euphrates. He inscribed the final wedge, a symbol denoting completion, and sat back, surveying his work. The damp clay glistened faintly in the fading light, the wedge, marks crisp and deep, holding the promise of legibility for generations. A sense of quiet satisfaction settled over him, as tangible as the cool clay beneath his palms. He carefully lifted the heavy tablet, feeling its damp weight, its surface cool and slightly gritty against his skin, and carried it to the shaded corner of the courtyard where it would rest overnight. Here, sheltered from the direct sun, but open to the dry night air, earlier tablets lay waiting for their own slow transformation. He placed the new tablet beside two others documenting pots commissioned for the New Year festival. The air here still carried the essence of wet earth, but overlain now with the delicate scent of night, blooming jasmine climbing the courtyard wall. Nazar ran his fingertips lightly over the inscription he'd just made, feeling the sharp edges of the wedges, the smooth valleys between them. He pictured the scribe tomorrow, perhaps a young acolyte, tracing these same marks with his eyes, understanding the story of the harvest captured here. These tablets weren't merely administrative. They were the physical memory of the city, a contract etched in earth between the present and the future. The light was failing rapidly now, painting the courtyard in long, deep blue shadows. Crickets began their nightly chorus, a gentle, pulsating sound that seemed to vibrate through the cooling bricks. Nabu. Nazar wiped his hands on a damp cloth, the red clay staining the rough fabric. He lingered for a moment, watching the first stars appear like scattered silver grains above the darkening silhouette of the great city walls. The day's heat was finally relinquishing its grip, replaced by a cooler, softer blanket of night air, still faintly perfumed with jasmine and the distant, comforting smell of the river. His own weariness, held at bay by the focus of his work, now settled deep into his bones, a pleasant heaviness. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache in his shoulders from hours of bending over the bench. The courtyard tiles were cool beneath his bare feet as he turned towards his small living quarters. Inside, the scent of the simple evening meal his wife had prepared, barley stew flavored with onions and cumin, mingled with the lingering aroma of clay. He washed his hands and face in a basin of cool water, the dust of the day swirling away. The simple meal was eaten in comfortable silence. The events of the day, the feel of the clay, the rhythm of the stylus, replaying softly in his mind. Later, lying on his reed mat, the day's images softened and blurred at the edges. The weight of the tablet he'd inscribed seemed to settle within him, a solid anchor in the quiet darkness. The rhythmic chirping of the crickets outside merged with the slow, deep rhythm of his own breathing. The cool night air drifted through the open window, carrying whispers from the river and the faint, sweet ghost of the date palms. His thoughts, once sharp as the reed stylus, now softened, dissolving like unfired clay returning to the earth. The city's distant murmur faded into a gentle hum, a lullaby sung by Babylon herself. The potter's world grew heavy, the boundaries between workshop, courtyard, and dreamscape dissolving like mist on the Euphrates at dawn. His last conscious sensation was the imagined coolness of the drying tablet in the courtyard, holding its silent vigil under the watchful stars, a small, enduring fragment of the vast, dreaming city. The first blush of dawn painted the Babylonian sky in streaks of rose and amber as Nazar stirred. Outside his window, the city's familiar symphony was tuning up, the distant lowing of oxen, the rhythmic clack of a loom from a neighboring house, and the ever-present murmur of water in the canals, carrying the scent of damp earth and green, growing things. He rose, the reed mat imprinting a temporary lattice on his skin, the cool air of night still clinging to the mud, brick walls. His bare feet found the smooth, sun-warmed tiles of the courtyard floor. His gaze went immediately to the shaded corner. His tablet lay there, no longer gleaming wet, but transformed to a lighter, cooler gray, the clay firmer now, the wedge. Marks set like tiny footprints in drying silt. He ran a careful fingertip along one row. Good. It held its shape. It needed only the sun's full heat now to bake it into permanence. He carefully lifted the tablet, its surface cool and slightly chalky to the touch, and carried it to the flat roof of his workshop, a space reserved for drying pots and tablets under the wide Mesopotamian sky. He placed it beside others already warming, the early sun kissing their surfaces, Below, Babylon unfurled like a tapestry woven in ochre and terracotta. Smoke began to curl from countless courtyards, carrying the tang of burning tamarisk wood and the richer aroma of baking sheshgalu bread. He inhaled deeply, the complex perfume of a city waking, wood smoke, baking grain, the faint, muddy breath of the Euphrates, and always the underlying sweetness of the date palms lining the grand processional way. Mesopotamians were amongst the first to develop precise timekeeping using water clocks and sundials, essential for regulating temple rituals and market hours. Nebuchadnezzar glanced at the lengthening shadow cast by a simple peg on the roof's edge, his own rough measure of the morning's progress. Time to begin the day's practical work. Descending back to his workshop, the familiar scent of wet clay, stored in large, porous jars covered with damp sacking, enveloped him. He pulled aside the sacking, plunging his hands into the cool, yielding mass, pulling out a hefty lump. The thumping began again, a deep, resonant thud, 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 as he drove air bubbles from the clay, working it against the wooden bench until it was perfectly homogeneous and supple. Today's task was mundane, but vital, sturdy storage jars for a merchant near the docks. He centered a large mound of clay on his kick wheel, a heavy stone disc set low in the packed earth floor. Dipping his hands in a bowl of water kept murky with clay, he set the wheel spinning with a practiced push of his foot. The world narrowed to the spinning mound, the pressure of his hands, the cool slip of water and clay. He coaxed the form upwards, fingers inside hollowing, outside shaping, the rhythmic swish, thump of the wheel a counterpoint to his own steady breathing. The bricks of Babylon, famed for their durability, were often bound with bitumen, a naturally occurring tar mined from vast seeps further up the Euphrates, making structures remarkably resistant to the region's damp. As the jar took form, broad-shouldered and thick-walled, Nebuchadnezzar thought of the bitumen barges he sometimes saw on the river, their black cargo glistening under the sun. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the workshop, making the clay dry faster on his hands, leaving a fine, pale dust. He shaped the jar's rim with a damp leather strip, smoothing it to a perfect, even circle. One jar done, set aside on a straw mat to stiffen slightly before adding handles. He repeated the process, the motions ingrained, almost meditative. His mind wandered back to the tablet drying on the roof. He pictured the temple scribe, Enlil Bani, a man whose fingers were stained not with clay, but with the dark ink used on parchment scrolls imported from Egypt. Enlil Bani would trace those wedges, confirming the temple's grain stores. Cuneiform wasn't just for accounts. Some of the oldest known pieces of literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, were painstakingly impressed onto countless such tablets, preserving myths and histories. Nebuchadnezzar felt a quiet pride. His hands gave form to the city's sustenance, pots, jars, roof tiles, but this tablet, this small rectangle of earth he'd marked, held words. It held memory. It held a piece of Babylon itself. By midday, the sun beat down fiercely. Nebuchadnezzar wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm, leaving a smudge of ochre. He moved his drying jars into the deeper shade of the workshop's interior, the air thick and still. He checked the roof. His tablet was warm, almost hot to the touch, the clay a pale biscuit color now, utterly dry and hard. Perfect for firing. He carried it carefully downstairs. The kiln, a large beehive-shaped structure built of fire, bricks in a corner of the courtyard, was still radiating residual heat from yesterday's firing. He pulled aside the heavy clay plug sealing the firing chamber. Inside, the walls were blackened, glowing faintly in the chamber's dimness, like captured embers. Using long, fire-hardened sticks, he carefully placed the tablet upright against the curved inner wall, nestling it amongst a batch of small offering bowls destined for a shrine to Ishtar. These small, often mass-produced votive items, frequently depicting goddesses or animals, filled the temples and homes of Babylon, reflecting the deep, everyday piety woven into Mesopotamian life. He positioned each piece precisely, ensuring air could circulate. Satisfied, he sealed the kiln plug again with wet clay, smearing it thickly to ensure an airtight seal. The firing would wait until the evening cool. The hottest part of the day demanded rest. Nebuchadnezzar retreated to the shaded portico beside the courtyard, sipping cool water flavored with a bruised date. The jasmine scent had faded, replaced by the drowsy hum of bees amongst the courtyard vines and the sharper, resinous smell of the date palms baking in the sun. A faint, hot wind rustled the broad palm fronds, a sound like dry parchment being gently shuffled. He watched dust motes dance in a single shaft of sunlight piercing the woven reed roof. His hands, resting on his knees, still held the memory of the clay, the coolness of the wet lump, the resistance of the drying slab, the smooth spin of the wheel. He thought of the kiln, a dormant beast holding his work, his small contribution to the city's endless murmur. The tablet within, once soft earth from the riverbank, was now becoming stone, like ready to hold its story against time. The heat pressed down, a physical weight. His eyelids grew heavy once more, lulled by the bees' drone and the whispering palms. The sharp lines of the courtyard blurred, softened by the golden haze of afternoon. He could almost feel the slow, patient heat within the kiln, a contained sun nurturing the transformation within its dark belly. The city's sounds, a distant cart clattering over stones, a child's shout, the coo of a dove, seemed to recede, muffled by the thick, warm air. His breathing deepened, matching the slow pulse of the day's zenith. The potter's hands relaxed, the tension of shaping and lifting easing away, sinking into the stillness like a smoothed coil of clay settling onto the wheel. The world narrowed to the dappled shade, the scent of hot earth and palm resin, and the deep, resonant silence that lived within the walls of the kiln. Holding its precious, hardening dreams, he leaned his head back against the cool mud, brick, the image of the drying tablet on the roof. Then nestled in the kiln's darkness, floating in his mind like a boat on the slow, sunlit Euphrates. The kiln bricks radiated a gentle warmth against his back, a comforting presence. The rhythmic tapping of a woodpecker somewhere in the distance echoed the beat of his own heart, slowing, softening. The fierce sun seemed to pause at its zenith, holding its breath. Nebuchadnezzar's thoughts drifted, unmoored, carried on the warm currents of air like dust motes in the golden light, settling towards the quiet hearth of sleep within the shaded portico. The heat wrapped around him like a familiar blanket, woven from sunlight, river scent, and the silent promise of clay becoming permanent. He felt the cool grit of the dried tablet surface beneath his dreaming fingertips, a tiny, enduring island in the vast, dreaming river of time. The kiln's quiet warmth seeped into his bones. The potter's world grew heavy once more. His last waking thought was the imagined click of a cooling tablet, a sound as small and significant as a star settling into the velvet night sky over Babylon. The courtyard tiles held the sun's memory. Nebuchadnezzar's breath deepened. The distant palm fronds whispered secrets only the sleeping city could hear. He would wake when the angle of the sun shifted, when the fierce heat began to wane, and the time came to light the kiln. For now, the clay dreams rested, hardening slowly in the dark, silent womb of fire, brick, guarded only by the watchful, slumbering potter and the patient sun. The scent of baking earth would soon mingle with wood smoke. Oh. But that was a task for the cooler, kinder hours of evening. The cuneiform tablet lay nestled amongst the votive bowls, already journeying from soft earth to enduring record within the kiln's patient heart. The slanting rays of late afternoon stretched long, golden fingers across the courtyard when Nabu, Nazir stirred. The fierce, direct heat had softened, replaced by a gentler warmth that radiated from the sun-baked bricks. He blinked, the deep, dreamless sleep of the afternoon siesta lifting slowly. The air still held the resinous scent of date palms, but now carried the sharper tang of tamarisk, smoke from cooking fires beginning to light across the city. A cool thread of air, whispering down from the north, teased the sweat on his brow. Time. He rose, joints stiff from the hard bench, and stretched, feeling the familiar pull in his shoulders. His first steps took him to the kiln. Placing a cautious palm against its curved flank, he felt the deep, banked heat radiating through the fire. Brick, not the searing fury of firing, but the patient, enduring warmth of stored energy. Satisfied, he turned to the stacked fuel, dried palm fronds for quick ignition, dense tamarisk logs for sustained heat, and bundles of fragrant cedar twigs scavenged from the distant mountains, their resinous perfume sharp in the cooling air. Mesopotamian kilns, often updraft designs, could reach temperatures exceeding 900 degrees C, hot enough to vitrify clay into durable pottery and ensure cuneiform inscriptions became permanent. He methodically fed the fuel into the firebox beneath the chamber, building a careful latticework of kindling over the glowing embers still nestled within the ash. Striking flint against iron, a shower of bright sparks cascaded onto a nest of dry reed fibers. A tiny plume of smoke, then a fragile, flickering flame bloomed. Nabu, Nazir nurtured it gently, blowing softly until it caught the brittle palm fronds. A crackle, a hiss, then a cheerful yellow flame licked upwards, hungry for the denser wood. He fed it slowly, deliberately, watching the smoke curl thick and gray from the kiln's small upper vent. The scent changed. The clean smell of burning wood layered over the mineral scent of hot brick and the ever-present dust. As the tamarisk caught, the fire settled into a deep, resonant roar, a contained beast growling within the kiln's belly. Heat pulsed visibly from the structure now, warping the air above it. He could feel it on his face, intense and dry. Carefully, he adjusted the dampers, controlling the air intake, ensuring the heat built steadily, evenly, without the dangerous flare that could crack his precious wares. Potters relied on experience and observation, the color of the flames, the sound of the kiln, the feel of its heat to gauge temperature long before the invention of pyrometers. The roar subsided slightly as the fire settled into its work, becoming a steady, powerful hum. Dusk was deepening, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep blues. Stars pricked through the fading light. Nabu, Nazir moved to the shaded corner of the workshop where the storage jar awaited its handles. The clay had stiffened perfectly. He scooped thick coils of fresh, cool clay, scoring the shoulder of the jar and the ends of each handle with his stylus before pressing them firmly into place, blending the seams seamlessly with wet fingers. The tactile pleasure was simple and profound, the cool slip, the slight resistance of the lither. Hard clay, the satisfying fusion of form and function. He set the jar aside, its silhouette now complete against the gathering gloom. Inside the kiln, unseen, his tablet and the votive bowls were undergoing their own quiet alchemy, the intense heat driving out the last vestiges of water. fusing the clay particles into stone. He washed his hands at the courtyard basin, the water cool and welcome. The city's evening. Sounds rose around him, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of families gathering. The distant plaintive notes of a shepherd's flute drifting from beyond the walls. The rich aroma of stews thickened with lentils and barley mingled with wood smoke and the faint, cool breath of the Euphrates. He ate his simple meal sitting on the low wall of the portico, watching the kiln's vent glow a sullen, deepening red against the twilight. Sparks occasionally danced upwards like tiny, fleeting stars. The contained inferno within was a stark counterpoint to the peaceful domesticity settling over Babylon. Broken pottery and discarded tablets were often reused pragmatically, ground into grog to temper new clay, or even crushed as aggregate in the mud, brick-making that endlessly rebuilt the city. Nebuchadnezzar thought of the thousands of tablets lying in temple archives, their stories silent but enduring, fragments of lives and harvests and prayers baked hard into eternity. Hours passed. The moon, a luminous silver disk, climbed high, casting sharp, black shadows. The roar within the kiln had softened to a deep, contented rumble. Nebuchadnezzar, wrapped in a rough woolen cloak against the night's surprising coolness, tended the fire with quiet vigilance. He added the last of the cedar twigs. Their sweet, sharp scent flared briefly, a final aromatic offering to the fire, god Jibble. He knew the peak heat had passed. Now, it was about slow, controlled cooling. Too rapid a drop could shatter even the hardest, fired clay. He began to partially block the air vents, starving the fire gradually. The glow from the vent dimmed from fierce orange, red to a dull, deep cherry. The radiating heat lessened its intensity, becoming a comforting warmth rather than a searing force. Fatigue, deeper now than the afternoon's drowsiness, settled over him. The rhythmic pulse of the cooling kiln, the distant lap of water in a canal, the chirping of crickets, these sounds wove a tapestry of night. He banked the fire low, ensuring only embers remained, glowing like captured fragments of the day's sun deep within the firebox. The kiln itself became a dark, warm monolith in the moonlit courtyard, holding its secrets close. Nebuchadnezzar's eyes felt gritty, his limbs heavy as the clay he shaped. He leaned back against a cool storage jar, the rough texture familiar against his shoulder blades. Above, the vast Mesopotamian sky stretched endlessly, dusted with countless stars. The air was crisp, clean now, carrying the scent of damp earth from the canals. Cold smoke and a lingering ghost of cedar. The intense focus of firing faded, replaced by a profound stillness. He could almost feel the silent transformation within the kiln's votive bowls, the sturdy storage jar, and his small, inscribed tablet, once soft river mud, now locked forever in its wedge-marked story, cooling slowly alongside the slumbering city. His own breath slowed, synchronizing with the kiln's diminishing heartbeat. The moon cast a silver path across the courtyard tiles. The potter's head nodded forward. The comforting warmth of the kiln at his back was like the embrace of the earth itself. The world narrowed to the cool night air, the scent of spent cedar, and the deep, resonant silence settling over Babylon, broken only by the watchful sigh of the great river flowing endlessly towards the sea. His thoughts, like the cooling embers, glowed softly, then dimmed. The weight of the day, the fire, the waiting clay, dissolved into the vast, star-strewn peace. The city's murmurs blended into a single, soothing hum, the lullaby of ancient stones and flowing water. The cuneiform tablet within the kiln, holding its record of grain and sun, seemed to pulse with a quiet, enduring warmth in the darkness air. Nebuchadnezzar's world grew heavy, His last conscious sensation was the imagined coolness of the fully fired clay, smooth and unyielding, a tiny, permanent star fallen to earth in the heart of dreaming Babylon. The kiln's warmth seeped into the night. The potter's eyelids grew impossibly heavy. The distant Euphrates whispered secrets only the moon could understand. Sleep, deep and dreamless, claimed him as the embers winked out, one by one, leaving only the patient, cooling heart of the kiln and the watchful stars above. The scent of cooled ashes would greet the dawnway. But that was a world away. For now, the clay dreams rested, transformed and enduring, within their brick womb. The tablet lay silent, its journey from riverbank to record complete, waiting only for the scribe's eye and the cool touch of morning. The first purely light of dawn washed over Babylon, cool and silent. Nebuchadnezzar awoke with a start, stiff from sleeping against the storage jar. The kiln, a great dark mound in the center of the courtyard, was utterly still. No heat radiated from its fire. Brick flanks now. Only the coolness of night, soaked clay remained. The air held the clean, mineral scent of cooled ashes and the returning sweetness of dew, damp date palms. A profound quiet lay over the city, broken only by the tentative chirp of waking birds. With reverence born of long practice, Nebuchadnezzar approached the kiln. The clay plug sealing the firing chamber was hard and cool. Using a chisel and mallet, he tapped carefully, the sound sharp in the stillness. The plug cracked, then crumbled away, revealing the dark interior. A puff of fine, cool ash drifted out. Reaching in with both hands, his fingers brushed against smooth, unyielding surfaces. He lifted out a small votive bowl. First, its surface was a warm terracotta, hard and resonant, when tapped with a fingernail. Then another. Then, carefully, he felt for the tablet. His fingers closed around its familiar rectangular shape, now transformed. It was cool, smooth, and possessed a surprising weight. He drew it out into the nascent dawn. The morning light fell upon it. The pale biscuit color had deepened to a rich, warm ochre. The surface was vitrified, hard as stone. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its solid permanence. The wedge-shaped impressions of his stylus were crisper than ever, locked forever into the fired clay. He traced a row with his thumb, no longer yielding earth, but enduring record. This small slab, born of river mud, now held words that could outlast empires, a testament to the ingenuity that first pressed meaning into earth. He pictured Enlil, Bani the scribe receiving it, tracing the wedges that spoke of barley and temple stores. The humble grain count was now part of Babylon's vast, accumulating memory, etched not on ephemeral parchment, but on earth made eternal by fire. Thousands like it, buried for millennia, would one day whisper the secrets of markets, myths, and daily life to future ages. He placed the fired tablet gently on his workbench. Beside it, the cool, unfired clay in its storage jar felt soft, alive with potential. The kiln stood silent, a vessel of transformation now spent. The city began to stir a distant cock crowd. The murmur of the river grew louder, the scent of baking bread began to weave through the cool air. Nebuchadnezzar looked from the enduring tablet to the waiting clay, from the captured past to the malleable future. He breathed in the dawn the scent of dew, warm earth, cold ash, and the promise of the river. A deep peace, as solid as the fired tablet in his hand, settled within him. The kiln's warmth had faded, replaced by the gentle, all-encompassing embrace of the new day. The rhythm of making and firing, of earth transformed and stories set in stone, was the timeless pulse beneath Babylon's bustling heart. The world felt clear, quiet, and profoundly complete. The cuneiform tablet grows heavy. Nebuchadnezzar's world fades, Carry this peace. Sleep well, time weaver. Gather your dreams, wary traveler. Tonight, we sail to the Indus Valley. Feel cool soapstone, smooth and dense beneath your fingers. Breathe in the rich, resinous sweetness of sandalwood, curling like smoke on the still air. And let history rock you to sleep. Dawn crept over Mohenjo-Daro, a blush of rose, gold washing the baked brick facades of the lower city. Within the shaded courtyard of a compact workshop, Vish stirred. Not with noise, but with a quiet intensity. His fingers, already dusted faintly with ochre and gray grit, moved over a shallow reed basket filled with rough stones. Carnelian, pebbles of fiery promise, ranging from deep, cloudy rust to pale, translucent honey. He selected one, a thumb-sized nodule the color of dried blood, feeling its cool weight, its jagged potential. The air hung heavy and still, carrying the scent of dust, dried tamarisk from the fuel pile, and the ever-present, grounding perfume of sandalwood oil, a drop rubbed onto his wrists each morning, an offering and a comfort. Mohenjo-Daro, a marvel of urban planning with its grid streets and advanced drainage, thrived on craftsmanship like Vish's, producing beads coveted across the ancient world. He settled onto a low stool, a thick slab of pale, cool soapstone secured firmly between his bare feet. Its smooth surface was a familiar anchor. Taking a slender, pointed copper drill bit, its tip hardened and sharp, he fitted it into a simple bow drill. The drill shaft was wood, but its socket was smooth, cool soapstone, precisely carved to hold the bit true. He looped the bowstring once around the shaft. Sish, fuorish, feu. The rhythmic rasp began as he drew the bow back and forth, a soft, persistent whisper against the morning quiet. The copper point bit into the carnelian pebble, held steady in his left hand, aided by a dab of gritty wet quartz powder as abrasive. Drilling these incredibly hard stones required immense patience and specialized tools like bow drills with stone sockets. A single bead could take days of meticulous work. Dust, smelling faintly metallic and mineral, rose in tiny puffs. Vish's world narrowed to the feel of the vibrating shaft. The pressure of his fingers, the slow, inevitable penetration of the stone. Sweat beaded on his brow, mingling with the dust, but his movements remained steady, unhurried. The rising sun painted a sharp rectangle of light on the packed earth floor, illuminating motes dancing in the still air. Hours passed, measured only by the deepening angle of the sunbeam and the gradual progress of the drill hole, piercing halfway through the stubborn carnelian. The scent of sandalwood grew stronger as the sun warmed the oil on his skin, blending with the mineral tang. He paused, carefully reversing the pebble, clamping it anew. The soapstone block beneath his feet remained stubbornly cool, a counterpoint to the warmth building in the workshop and the heat generated by friction at the drill point. Sish, sik, sish, siki. The rhythm resumed, a hypnotic counterpoint to the distant sounds of the city waking. The lowing of zebu cattle, the splash of water drawn from a well, the faint chatter from neighboring courtyards. Finished beads were polished to a high luster, using progressively finer abrasives, transforming rough stone into glowing gems that traveled trade routes reaching Mesopotamia and beyond. Vish imagined this bead, this tiny sphere of captured sunlight, perhaps destined for the neck of a merchant's wife in distant Ur, or buried as an offering in the foundations of a new house. He blew away the accumulated gray dust, revealing the emerging hole, clean and straight, almost there. As the sun climbed towards its zenith, the sish, TK ceased. The hole was through. Vish held the drilled pebble up to the light. It was still rough, angular, clouded with dust within the bore, but the crucial first step was complete. He placed it carefully aside on a clean reed mat, selecting the next candidate, a smaller, paler piece with a promising core of clear orange. The bow drill whispered again, a sound as much a part of Mohenjo-Daro as the bricks or the river. The soapstone's cool solidity grounded him. The sandalwood scent, warm and sacred, seemed to weave through the dust motes in the sunbeam, a fragrant thread connecting the mundane toil to something deeper, older. His fingers moved with practiced certainty, feeling the stone's resistance. The bite of the drill, the subtle vibrations traveling up the shaft. The city's heat intensified, pressing down, but within the workshop's shade, focused on the tiny point of contact between copper and carnelian. Vish worked in a bubble of concentrated calm. The drilled pebble beside him, though far from finished, held the potential for radiance, a small, hard, won victory in the quiet heart of the ancient city. The rhythmic rasp was the song of making, of transformation, echoing the patient pulse of the Indus itself, flowing unseen but ever present beyond the orderly streets. The dust settled slowly onto the cool soapstone block. Vish's gaze remained fixed on the turning point. The scent of sandalwood deepened, a comforting veil against the day's growing heat. The relentless sun climbed higher, hammering the baked, brick lanes of Mohenjo-Daro into shimmering waves of heat. Inside Vish's shaded courtyard workshop, the air hung thick and still, vibrating with the high-pitched scree of stone on stone. Sweat traced paths through the fine gray dust coating Vish's arms and neck, dripping occasionally onto the soapstone block where his feet still braced. Before him lay the drilled carnelian pebble, no longer a rough nodule, but now roughly shaped into a crude cylinder. He worked it vigorously against a flat slab of coarse, gritty sandstone, its surface dark with water and stone slurry. Scree. Each stroke shaved away microscopic fragments, rounding the sharp edges, coaxing form from stubborn mineral. The scent of wet stone, mineral, sharp and dusty, mingled with the warm, resinous sandalwood clinging to his skin and the dry tang of tamarisk wood stacked nearby. The uniformity of Indus Valley beads, found across vast distances, speaks to incredibly precise craft standards and possibly regulated workshops within cities like Mohenjo-Daro. Vish paused, dipping the bead and the sandstone into a shallow clay bowl of murky water. The slurry swirled, momentarily clearing the surface. He examined the cylinder, still faceted, still imperfect, but slowly surrendering its angular defiance. Back to the grind. Scree. His world contracted to the point of friction, the vibration traveling up his arm. The cool splash of water, the diminishing resistance of the carnelian. The city sounds, the distant cries of children playing near the great bath. The clatter of a potter's wheel somewhere down the lane. The ever-present hum of water flowing in the meticulously laid brick drains faded into a background tapestry woven by the heat. Mohenjo-Daro's advanced drainage system, with covered channels and regular inspection points, was unparalleled in the ancient world, crucial for hygiene in the dense, river-plain city. He imagined the water flowing cool and purposeful beneath the sun-scorched streets, a hidden lifeblood mirroring his own patient, liquid-assisted work. The cylinder grew smoother, its fiery orange core beginning to hint at the inner glow it would possess. He switched to a finer, grained sandstone, the screech softening to a lower, more persistent hush. The slurry now ran a paler ochre. Time dissolved, shape emerged, as the sun began its slow, golden descent. Painting the workshop walls in long, cooling shadows, Vish finally set the sandstone aside. In his palm lay an oval bead, still matte and clouded with fine scratches, but undeniably smooth, its drilled hole clean and central. The rough promise had been realized into form. He rinsed it in clean water, the carnelian glistening wetly, its color deepening to a rich, molten sunset hue. Reaching for a worn leather pouch, he poured a small mound of the finest polishing powder onto a smooth, water-slicked slab of green soapstone, a different piece, reserved for this final transformation. This powder was a precious mix, finely ground quartz and emery, painstakingly sieved. Using a damp leather pad, he dabbed it into the powder and began rubbing the bead in small, tight circles. Swish, swish, swish. This sound was softer, more intimate, a whisper of promise. Indus Valley craftspeople mastered complex techniques like etching white patterns onto carnelian beads using a sodium carbonate paste, creating stunning contrasts, though such adornment would come later for this bead. For now, pure, unadorned radiance was the goal. The leather pad moved relentlessly, the friction generating a faint warmth. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the scratches faded. The surface began to capture the fading light, not just reflecting it, but holding it within a tiny, captured ember. The air cooled rapidly as dusk approached. The scent of cooking fires, cumin, mustard seed, and roasting grains began to overlay the mineral tang and sandalwood. Vish worked on. The swish-swish a rhythmic counterpoint to the settling city. His fingers, though calloused, felt the subtle change in the bead's surface under the leather. It was becoming slick, glassy. He rinsed it again, holding it up to the last rays of the sun slanting into the courtyard. Light blazed through it, transforming the solid stone into a vessel of liquid fire, illuminating intricate bands of deeper red and gold within its core. A profound satisfaction, deep and quiet, settled in Vish's chest. This tiny, hard-won sphere held the essence of the long day's toil, the dust, the sweat, the patient friction, the coolness of the soapstone and water. He imagined it strung with others, perhaps alongside gleaming gold or cool lapis lazuli, adorning a priestess or sealing a merchant's pact. It was more than ornament. It was a testament to skill, patience, and the enduring human desire to wrest beauty from the earth. Exhaustion, held at bay by concentration, now washed over him. His shoulders ached. His eyes felt gritty. The light was failing. He carefully rinsed the bead one last time, the water now shockingly cold from the earthenware jar. He dried it on a soft scrap of undyed wool, feeling its final, astonishing smoothness, cool and dense as a river pebble. He placed it on a clean fragment of pottery, beside the soapstone block, where it glowed softly in the twilight like a captive coal. The rich scent of sandalwood seemed to deepen in the cooling air, mingling with wood smoke and the mineral scent of the workshop. The city's sounds softened into a gentle evening murmur. Vish stretched, his muscles protesting, and splashed cool water on his face and arms, washing away the day's dust, the grit swirling in the basin. He looked at the bead, a small, perfect point of fire in the gathering gloom. The rhythmic rasp and swish still echoed faintly in his bones, a phantom pulse of creation. The cool soapstone block beneath his hand felt grounding, eternal. His gaze lingered on the carnelian, its fiery heart seeming to pulse in the twilight. The dust settled. The scent of sandalwood wrapped around him like a soft shawl. The city's distant hum blended with the whisper of the Indus, flowing endlessly beyond the brick walls. The ache in his arms deepened into a pleasant heaviness. His eyelids felt weighted, his focus softening like the edges of the fading light. The bead, a tiny sun captured in stone, seemed to hold the warmth of the day within its polished core, radiating a quiet peace into the shadowed workshop. The transformed bead rested deep within the cooling ashes, a secret sun banked in gray. Vish sat back on his heels, the exhaustion of intense focus settling into his bones like the settling dust. The air in the courtyard shifted rapidly as true dusk descended. The lingering warmth radiating from the kiln's bricks met the sudden coolness rising from the packed earth, creating invisible currents that stirred the ash-scented air. The rich, resinous perfume of sandalwood mingled now with the mineral tang of cooled stone, and the ghost of wood smoke seemed denser in the twilight, wrapping around him like a shawl. Across Mohenjo-Daro, the diurnal rhythm changed. The clatter of daytime industry gave way to softer sounds, the murmur of families gathering in courtyards, the rhythmic scrape of grinding stones preparing the evening meal, the distant, haunting notes of a bone flute drifting from somewhere near the citadel. The Indus Valley people used remarkably standardized stone weights based on precise units, facilitating fair trade across the vast cities and with distant lands like Mesopotamia, where their beads were treasured. Vish remained still, watching the last embers in the kiln's heart wink out, one by one. The profound silence after the fire's roar felt sacred. He knew the bead needed time, cradled in the insulating ash, to cool slowly and evenly, preventing any stress that could cloud its newly revealed depths, or worse, cause a hidden fracture. Patience was as much a tool as the bow drill. He rose stiffly, his muscles protesting the hours of crouching. Splashing cool water from a large earthenware gerra over his face and arms, he washed away the grime of fire, tending and the fine, clinging ash. The water was shockingly cold, sharpening his senses. He dried himself on a rough cotton cloth, the weave familiar against his skin. The scent of cumin, turmeric, and simmering lentils wafted from the adjoining living quarters, a warm, comforting counterpoint to the mineral coolness of the workshop. He ate his simple meal seated on the low threshold, watching the stars emerge, brilliant and sharp in the clear Indus night. The bead, hidden in its ashy nest, felt present in his mind, a tiny, concentrated point of warmth slowly yielding to the night. He pictured its journey, the rough pebble from the distant riverbed, the patient drilling, the grinding, the polishing, the transformative fire. Archaeological finds reveal Indus Valley beads, particularly long carnelian ones, traveled thousands of miles, reaching the royal tombs of Ur, testament to the extensive trade networks flourishing over 4 millennia ago. Would this small, perfect sphere find its way onto a priestess's necklace in the Great Bath, or be bartered to a seafaring merchant bound for the Persian Gulf? Later, under a canopy of stars so vast it felt like falling upwards, Vish returned to the kiln. The ashes were completely cold now. With infinite care, he brushed away the gray powder, his fingers searching the darkness. They closed around smoothness, coolness, density. He lifted the bead. Even in the faint starlight, it glowed. The internal fire ignited by the heat treatment hadn't diminished. It had been concentrated. Where before it had been the color of sunset, it now held the deep, luminous heart of a ruby kissed by embers, swirling with bands of gold and crimson light seemingly suspended within the stone. It felt heavier, denser, imbued with the memory of fire. He carried it inside to the small oil lamp flickering near his sleeping mat. Holding it close to the flame was a revelation. The carnelian became a miniature captured inferno. Light didn't just reflect off its surface. It plunged into the stone's depths, swirling and dancing within its crystalline structure, illuminating hidden landscapes of color, molten gold rivers, veins of deep crimson, pockets of translucent amber. The high polish, achieved before the firing, now gave it a liquid sheen, making it seem as if the light itself was trapped oil. Despite the sophistication of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, the reasons for the eventual decline of the Indus Valley civilization around 1900 BCE remain debated, with theories ranging from climate change altering river courses to shifts in trade patterns. Vish turned the bead slowly, mesmerized by the play of light within its core. This tiny, perfect object felt like a defiance of time, a fragment of enduring beauty wrested from the earth and the fire. The day's labor, the heat, the intense focus, dissolved into a profound, quiet awe. He placed the bead carefully on a small, clean indentation in a soapstone amulet case beside his mat. The single lamp flame guttered low. Outside, the city slept. The distant flute had ceased. Only the whisper of the night wind through the narrow lanes and the rhythmic chirping of crickets remained. The scent of sandalwood from his skin mingled with the faint, comforting smell of the cooling kiln's mineral breath and the lingering warmth of the day trapped within the thick brick walls. Vish lay down, the cool cotton of his mat a relief. His eyes, gritty with fatigue, kept drifting to the bead resting in its soapstone hollow. Even in the near darkness, it seemed to hold a faint, internal luminescence, a promise of the fire it had embraced. The ache in his muscles softened into a deep, grounding heaviness. The rhythmic pulse of the crickets outside seemed to synchronize with his own slowing heartbeat. The bead's captured light pulsed softly in his fading vision. Its cool, dense smoothness, the last tactile memory. The sandalwood sent a final, soothing veil. The city's silence was complete now, a vast, dreaming exhalation under the watchful stars. The first touch of dawn was a cool, gray sigh against the baked bricks of Mohenjo-Daro. Vish stirred, not from the growing light, but from the deep, resonant silence that precedes the city's awakening. His eyes opened, finding the small soapstone amulet case beside his mat. Nestled within its hollow, the carnelian bead glimmered faintly, catching the nascent gray light not with the blazing fire of the lamp, but with a deep, inner warmth, like a banked ember. It felt cool and impossibly dense as he picked it up, its polished surface smooth as water-worn glass. The scent of cooled ash and lingering sandalwood still clung to the air in the small room, mingling now with the fresh, damp smell of dew settling on the courtyard outside. He rose, moving quietly. The kiln in the courtyard was a dark, cool mound. He scooped a handful of the fine ash cold and soft as powdered bone, letting it trickle through his fingers. The transformation was complete. This tiny sphere of fire and earth was ready. Today it would leave his hands. He washed quickly, the cold water sharpening his senses, then carefully placed the bead in a small, finely woven reed basket lined with soft cotton wool. It nestled there, a secret sun. Outside, the city was beginning to murmur. The rhythmic splash of water drawn from wells echoed down the orderly lanes. The lowing of zebu cattle drifted from the outskirts. The scent of unleavened bread baking on clay griddles, warm, nutty, comforting, began to weave through the cooler air, overlaying the mineral dust and the ever-present, grounding perfume of sandalwood that Vish reapplied to his wrists. Archaeological evidence suggests specialized bead-making workshops, like Vish's, were often clustered near the citadel areas of Indus cities, indicating organized craft production. He picked up the basket and stepped into the lane, The rising sun, still low and golden, painted the meticulously laid brick facades in long, sharp shadows. Vish walked with purpose towards the Great Bath Complex, the heart of the city's ritual and commerce. The streets, wide and straight thanks to Mohenjo-Daro's advanced urban planning, were filling. Potters carried stacks of buff, colored vessels. Women balanced water pots on their heads. Children darted like minnows through the growing throng. The air thickened with the smell of damp earth from the drains, baking bread, spices, human activity, and the faint, sweet, musky scent of the river itself, unseen but omnipresent. The Indus script, found primarily on seals and amulets, remains undeciphered, its precise purpose and meaning one of the civilization's enduring mysteries. Vish passed a stone cutter meticulously chiseling symbols onto a statite seal, a unicorn-like beast. Geometric patterns, its meaning locked within the silent script. He reached a shaded colonnade near the imposing structure of the Great Bath. Here, merchants gathered. Vish found Harriet, a trader whose weathered face and keen eyes were as familiar as the bricks of the city. Harriet dealt in luxuries, lapis lazuli from the distant mountains, gleaming copper ornaments, and the fiery carnelian beads Mohenjo-Daro was famed for. He was already inspecting a string of etched beads, their white geometric patterns stark against deep red stone. "Vish," Harriet greeted, his voice a low rumble. "What son have you captured today?" Vish opened the reed basket. Harriet's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, immediately fixed on the bead nestled in the cotton wool. He didn't touch it at first, he simply looked. Then, with fingers surprisingly delicate for a man who hauled bales, he lifted it. He held it up to the strengthening sunlight. The effect was instantaneous. The bead transformed. Light poured into it, igniting its depths, swirling rivers of molten gold, veins of crimson fire, pockets of luminous amber. It wasn't just red, it was a captured sunset, a miniature universe of flame. The high polish made it seem liquid, alive. "Ah," Harriet breathed, a sound of pure appreciation. He rotated it slowly. "The fire sings true in this one." Deep, clear, he glanced at Vish. "Your kiln honored the stone." Vish felt a quiet pride warm his chest, deeper than the sun on his back. Harriet reached for his scales, beautifully carved soapstone beams suspended from a cord, with perfectly shaped chert weights. Indus Valley merchants used an exceptionally precise and standardized system of stone weights, based on a binary decimal system, ensuring fairness in trade across the vast civilization and beyond. He selected a tiny weight, placing it on one pan. The bead, cool and heavy, went on the other. The balance was perfect. Harriet nodded, satisfied. He placed the bead carefully onto a growing strand of similar treasures, deep blue lapis, creamy faience, pale agate, each bead separated by tiny gold spacers. The carnelian, nestled amongst them, blazed like the heart of the necklace. "This," Harriet said, securing the strand in a lined wooden box, "will warm the neck of a prince in Meluha, or perhaps cross the sea to the land of two rivers. It carries the fire of Mohenjo-Daro." He handed Vish a small, heavy linen bag containing polished cowrie shells and several small, standardized copper ingots, payment sealed by the balance. Vish accepted it, the weight solid in his hand. He watched Harriet close the box. His bead, born of river pebble and patient toil, shaped by grit and water, transformed by fire, was now part of a greater current. It would travel, carrying the skill of his hands, the essence of his city, far beyond the baked, brick lanes and the whispering Indus. The sun was fully risen now, warm on his face. The scent of sandalwood, bread, and the river mingled. A profound quiet settled within him, deeper than the city's waking bustle. The journey of the bead had truly begun. A tiny, enduring fragment of Mohenjo-Daro set adrift on the tides of time and trade. The weight of the payment bag was solid. The image of the blazing bead amongst the lapis lingered. The city's sounds blended into a single, flowing murmur. The copper ingots and smooth cowrie shells lay heavy in the small linen bag tucked into Vish's waistband. The transaction's crisp finality lingered in the air, near the great bath colonnade, a stark contrast to the slow, patient alchemy of the workshop. The sun climbed higher, its heat pressing down on the orderly brick lanes, drawing out the scent of warm dust, baking clay, and the faint, damp breath of the covered drains beneath his sandals. Mohenjo-Daro's inhabitants enjoyed remarkably advanced sanitation, with many houses featuring private bathing platforms and waste chutes feeding directly into the city's sophisticated covered sewer system, a marvel of Bronze Age engineering. Vish turned away from the merchant bustle, the image of his bed nestled amongst the lapis, and gold still vivid, a tiny, captured ember destined for a distant neck. He walked slowly, not back to his workshop immediately, but towards the quieter residential quarter. The rhythmic thump of grain being pounded in mortars echoed from shaded courtyards, mingling with the softer chatter of women weaving on looms set beneath overhanging roofs. The air here held subtler notes, the tang of drying fish from a rooftop rack, the sweetness of ripening figs in a walled garden, the pervasive, comforting resin of sandalwood drifting from open doorways. He stopped at a modest dwelling, its doorway framed by a faded terracotta amulet depicting the horned deity often found on Indus seals. An elderly woman, her face a map of gentle lines, sat carding raw cotton in the shaded entrance. Her name was Aparna. Vish knelt, the cool brick step a relief against his knees. He placed several cowrie shells and one small copper ingot onto a clean palm leaf beside her. "For the thread, grandmother," he said softly, "and your blessings." Aparna's eyes, faded but sharp, crinkled at the corners. She touched the payment, then reached out, her calloused fingers brushing Vish's dusty forearm. "The fire sings true in your hands, Vish," she murmured, echoing Harriet's words. "It brings life." She gestured towards a basket beside her filled with spools of thread strong, fine cotton spun to perfection. Some dyed deep indigo or vibrant madder red. It was Aparna's thread that had bound the protective cotton wool around his beads, her skill as vital to their safe journey as his own. Cotton cultivation and advanced textile production, including dyeing with complex natural pigments like indigo and madder, were key Indus Valley industries, their fabrics highly prized. Vish felt a familiar warmth, deeper than commerce, in this exchange, the quiet interdependence of the craftspeople. Back in his own courtyard workshop, the stillness felt different. The kiln was cold and silent. The soapstone block, scarred from countless hours of grinding and polishing, sat waiting. The basket of rough carnelian pebbles seemed to watch him. The tangible presence of the finished bead, the focus of his last days, was gone. Its absence was a palpable space. He moved instinctively, gathering the scattered tools, the bow drill, its string slack, the slabs of sandstone. Gritty with dried slurry, the leather pouch holding the precious polishing powder. He rinsed them in a basin of cool water, drawn from the large gara, the mineral scent rising fresh. Sitting on his low stool, the cool soapstone block solid beneath his feet once more, Vish picked up a new pebble. Honey, colored, translucent, promising. He held its cool weight. The rhythmic rasp of the bow drill, the hypnotic grind of sandstone, the patient whisper of the polishing leather, these were his constants. The bead that journeyed was but one star in a constellation he would endlessly craft. Despite their urban sophistication, the Indus Valley people maintained a deep connection to nature, evident in their reverence for animals like the bull and the unicorn, like beasts depicted on seals, and their intricate pottery designs featuring flora and fauna. He felt that connection now, in the stone from the river, the water from the well, the fire from the kiln, the cotton from Aparna's spindle. He placed the honey-colored pebble on the soapstone, positioning the copper drill bit. The courtyard was quiet now, the city's midday lull deepening. Only the drone of bees amongst the jasmine climbing the far wall and the faint, rhythmic splash of water from a neighbor's courtyard broke the silence. The rich scent of sandalwood, rising from his own skin as the sun warmed it, filled the small space, a familiar anchor. He looped the bowstring. Sish, sekus, sish, creakwu. The whisper began again, softer than before. A meditation in motion. Dust puffed, catching the sunlight slanting through the reed roof. The journey of the last bead was complete, but the river of making flowed on. The ache in his shoulders from yesterday's firing had faded to a familiar hum. The cool soapstone beneath his feet, and the weight of the pebble in his hand, the rhythmic pull of the bow, these sensations grounded him, pulling him back into the deep, patient wellspring of his craft. The memory of the blazing carnelian softened, becoming one ember amongst many yet to be kindled in the cool, enduring earth of his workshop. The city's heat pressed down, a tangible blanket, the scent of sandalwood wove through the dust motes dancing in the sunbeam. The rhythmic rasp of the drill became the pulse of the quiet afternoon. His focus narrowed to the turning point, the tiny, persistent bite into stone. The honey-colored pebble yielded slowly. Vish's breath deepened, synchronizing with the bow's motion. The world beyond the courtyard dimmed, fading into the golden haze. The carnelian bead, journeying far away, seemed to pulse once, a distant echo, then dissolved into the quiet rhythm of making that filled the shaded workshop, as timeless as the Indus flowing beyond the city walls. The slanting light of late afternoon painted long, cool shadows across Vish's courtyard. The rhythmic sesh, craquet of the bow drill had long ceased. The honey-colored carnelian pebble, now drilled clean through, lay beside the scarred soapstone block, resting on its bed of cotton wool like a sleeping ember. The tools were rinsed and put away, the fine polishing powder sealed in its leather pouch. The kiln stood silent and cool, its brick flanks holding only the memory of transformative fire. The scent of sandalwood, though faded, still clung to the air, mingling with the mineral tang of stone dust and the damp, cool breath rising from the packed earth as the fierce heat of the day relinquished its hold. Vish sat on the low threshold, his back against the sun-warmed brick. The weight of the copper ingots and cowrie shells at his waist was a solid anchor, a tangible echo of the fiery bead now journeying down the Indus, perhaps already bound for the distant sea. He watched dust motes dance in the golden shaft of light piercing the reed roof, thinking not of distant princes, but of the river pebbles still waiting in their basket. Each one held a universe of potential fire, a future-captured sunset waiting for his hands, his patience, the whisper of the bow, the grit of sandstone, the kiss of flame. Mohenjo-Daro thrived on this intricate web of skilled potter, weaver, metalworker, bead maker, each craft interdependent, weaving the fabric of the city's enduring legacy. A deep quiet settled within him, as profound as the silence after the kiln's roar. It wasn't emptiness, but the fertile stillness that follows completion and precedes new creation. The ache in his shoulders was familiar, a badge of honest labor. The cool brick at his back, the fading warmth of the day on his skin, the faint, returning sweetness of the date palm fronds rustling in the evening breeze, these sensations were the bedrock of his world. The city's sounds softened, the distant splash of a water jar being filled, the low murmur of neighbors, the first tentative chirp of an evening cricket. The precise grid of streets, the advanced drainage whispering beneath them, the sheer scale of the Great Bath, all spoke of a society capable of remarkable collective effort. Yet Vish's peace lay in the small, perfect circle of a single bead, born of solitary focus. He thought of Aparna's thread, strong and fine, binding his creations for their journey, connecting his quiet courtyard to the vast, humming network of trade that carried Mohenjo-Daro's fire to the world. He rose, the movement unhurried. The honey-colored pebble felt cool and promising in his palm. Tomorrow, the grinding would begin. The rhythm would resume, for now the workshop rested. The kiln dreamed of future fires. The river pebbles slept. Vish stood for a moment longer, watching the last molten sliver of sun vanish behind the orderly brick rooftops. The scent of sandalwood was a ghost now, a memory woven into the cooling air. The carnelian bead, a tiny, enduring spark of his skill, traveled far beyond the city walls, carrying a fragment of Mohenjo-Daro's quiet brilliance into the gathering twilight of history. The weight of the day settled. The cool pebble pulsed softly in his hand. The city's murmur blended with the eternal whisper of the unseen Indus. The soapstone block grew cool. Vish's world softened at the edges. The dust motes settled like stars in the dusk-filled workshop. The carnelian bead journeys on. Vish's breath deepened. Carry this piece into the quiet heart of the ancient city. Sleep well, time, weaver.